Mike Brown, the former FEMA director.
Joining us here is the former FEMA director.
History, I think, was very unkind to you, my friend. Very unkind.
Mr. Brown, thanks for being with us.
This is Michael Brown Unplugged.
Hey, welcome to this episode of Michael Brown Unplugged. Glad to have you with me. I'm always amazed, and you've probably heard me talk before about people who will say, well, I have nothing to hide. So they don't care about privacy laws. They don't care about the privacy of their data, the privacy of the most intimate details of their lives. And I'm always struck, too, when I look at, and I tend, and I've really been trying to shift my social media presence away from more personal items, even though I want to make it as personal as possible, to giving you my particular position or thinking or perspective on a topic of the day. And then there are those people, and I'm not criticizing them, I'm just scratching my head, who constantly post photographs of their children, where they're at, where they're traveling. They just checked in here, they just did this, they just did that. And I keep thinking to myself, all of that information that you're providing to Facebook, or for that matter, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, or anybody else, TikTok. I need to talk about TikTok sometime. Anybody know about TikTok? I'm always fascinated by people's willingness, because all they do is for example, right now I'm looking at two laptop screens. And when you think about when you're on Facebook, either on your smartphone, your tablet, or your laptop, maybe not so much a desktop, because maybe you're standing at a desk or whatever, and the screen's larger and you have more windows open. But when you're at one of these small devices and you have one of the social media sites opened, and I'm not trying to discourage people from using social media sites. I'm simply trying to get people to think about what it is that you post. And then when you post those items, what kind of data goes along with that can then be sold to advertisers, or in the worst possible situation, be provided to government, and in particular, law enforcement. You may or may not have heard, but in the past week, news has spread in some quarters about a Florida judge's decision to grant a warrant, a search warrant, allowing law enforcement to search one of the largest online DNA databases as they look for leads in a criminal case. Now, before I go into the particulars, I want you to think about the warrant itself. So the warrant was approved to search an open source genealogy database called GED Match. GED Match. There are about 1.3 million users that have uploaded their DNA data onto that database. Now, I doubt that anybody, and I've not read or seen the TOS, the Terms of Service, for this particular database. So I don't know what it says about the privacy requirements. But regardless of what the privacy requirements or standards are for GED Match, nonetheless, a judge has said, okay, law enforcement, you're looking for leads in some criminal cases. I'm going to allow you to search the entire database. This is a fishing expedition. This means that people who have no ties, no tenuous sort of link between their DNA and any one particular criminal investigation that law enforcement is conducting, are nonetheless swept up in this sweeping search warrant that allows law enforcement to go through approximately 1.3 million users to see if they can find a match anywhere. Now, I don't know about you, but, my DNA, now, when I talk about my DNA, I'm talking about skin, hair. I'm obviously not talking about semen or, well, and maybe to some degree I might be talking about saliva, because when you speak, you can't help but saliva is thrown from your mouth as you speak. That's why on the mic socks, as I euphemistically call them microphone condoms. I regularly wash those, primarily because even though it's my own saliva and even though it's me speaking into this particular microphone and this particular mic sock, over time, that bacteria just continues to grow. But I'm digressing here. The point being that you have hair that falls out, you have skin cells that flake off. As you talk to friends or somebody else, saliva is poured out onto whatever surfaces are around. So I'm talking about that kind of DNA. I'm not talking about the kind of DNA that would, you would get from a semen sample, for example. But a decision of this kind really ought to raise concerns, and it sets, in my opinion, a new precedent for law enforcement's ability to access online DNA databases. Should you be concerned? Now, this happens to be an Australian case, but I can see, absent some lawyer really making a strong objection, that I could see law enforcement in the United States going to 23andMe, Ancestry.com, any of these places where you send off DNA samples and they tell you back, oh, you're part this or part that. I could see at some point a judge saying, oh, yeah, you can go sweep those databases. Now, here's why it's a big deal. GED Match, the way it works with this particular company, allows users to upload raw genetic data obtained from companies such as Ancestry or 23andMe, and then that gets matched with relatives who have also uploaded their data. So it's almost like instead of a dating site, it's almost like a relative dating site, a relative match site. So you've sent your DNA off to 23andMe or Ancestry.com, and they've sent all of that back. Well, now you can take the results of that and upload it to GED Match, and then they start trying to match that to all of the other uploads into their database and tell you, oh, yeah, we found some relatives. Now, I'm not trying to be a jerk here. I get that some people want to do that because maybe they're an adopted child and they're trying to find a birth mother, a birth father. Maybe they've lost track because they were in a foster situation and so they got separated and they're trying to find siblings. I get why people would do this. All I'm trying to point out is the law doesn't necessarily catch up to the kinds of things that we do that expose the most intimate, private details of our lives to law enforcement. Now, law enforcement's capacity to use GED Match to solve crimes actually became newsworthy last April because that was when it was used to solve the Golden State Killer case. Now, after that case, it raised, I think, significant public concern around privacy issues. And then GED says that it updated its terms and conditions last May. And under the new terms, law enforcement agencies can only access user data in cases where users have consented to use by law enforcement. So far, out of the 1.3 million people in the database, only 185,000 people have opted in to allowing GED Match to provide their information to law enforcement. But the terms of the warrant that were granted in Florida allowed access to the entire database, including individuals who had not opted in. That not only violates the explicit terms of service, which require user consent, but in my opinion violates the Fourth Amendment. The problem is GED Match, reportedly complied with the search warrant within 24 hours of it being granted. They rolled over completely. Now, GED Match is really small compared with the Ancestry database giants like Ancestry.com, which has more than 15 million individuals in its database, and 23andMe that has more than 10 million individuals in their database, both of which have DNA data belonging to people from all over the world. Now let's go to Australia, because I think Australians are particularly at risk. Those who wish to have ancestry DNA testing have to use U.S.-based online companies. So many Australians have data in databases such as Ancestry, 23andMe, and GED Match, but now they have been subjected to a U.S.-based search warrant which says you can search all of that database, even if the Australians haven't granted access or haven't agreed or given consent to do that. Ancestry.com and 23andMe both have policies saying that they don't provide access to their databases without a valid court-mandated process. Now, that's an easy line to put in to a press release. Well, we don't do it without a court-ordered mandated process. Well, unless 23andMe or Ancestry.com give notice to that request for a search warrant, or unless they themselves go fight that search warrant and try to get it quashed, or you don't have the chance to go get it quashed, that means that the case in Florida could be, a similar search warrant could be issued again, and suddenly Australians, Brits, people from anywhere in the world who have used 23andMe or Ancestry.com are now going to be subjected to this sweeping search warrant. So that the privacy laws, the privacy policy, I should say, the privacy policies of companies and organizations that hold genetic data and other type of private data usually include a statement saying that their data is not going to be shared without consent, quote, except as required by law. So if a judge in Florida, and nobody contests the judge in Florida, issues a sweeping search warrant to go through and look at all of the databases, a fishing expedition, if you will, whether you're Australian, you're Brits, you're from Singapore, you're from wherever it might be, and your DNA is in that database, you never receive notice. You never have the opportunity to challenge that case. But there are some countries in the European Union that have started establishing government-funded national databases of gene donor data of their own. Sweden and Estonia are doing that. What do you do then? If the government starts establishing a DNA database, which in some places in the U.S. we have that, would you agree to provide that DNA information to a government database? And if the government, and I don't think this would ever happen, I say never. I've learned to never say never, because in this environment, you can't say that because too many people are too willing, too easily to give up their privacy. But what if? What if the federal government or the state of Colorado or the state of Texas or wherever you happen to be listening to this podcast were to say that, yes, we're going to require all citizens to provide DNA in order, because this is the language that would be used, in order to provide a more secure state and in order to protect you against criminal elements, in order to help us solve criminal cases, we want your data. We want your DNA. I don't know how many Americans would do that. But my fear is more Americans than I think would do that. That would be a huge blow to the Fourth Amendment that says that we have a right to privacy, that we have a right to be secure in our persons and in our papers against unreasonable searches and seizures. And I think a blanket warrant saying, oh yeah, you can go to Ancestry.com, you can go to 23andMe, and you can take the DNA that you have from a crime scene, and you can then try to match that against what were the numbers, 14 million, 10 million, against all of those millions of people in that database. And if you find a match, then you can go after that person. That's dragging in the private sector to do the work of the public sector. In this case, law enforcement. I have been conflicted because I would really like to do one of these 23andMe or Ancestry.com DNA tests because of my grandfather's Cherokee Indian heritage. Yeah, Elizabeth Warren. I've never used it to gain any sort of privilege or anything else, but my grandfather was a Cherokee Indian. And I'd like to see how much of that Cherokee blood has been transferred to me. But, on the other hand, do I want my DNA samples in a database that with or without my knowledge? Because even if it's with my knowledge, let's say that I do it, and a judge in Florida or Colorado or somewhere else issues a blanket warrant that says, yeah, you can go search Ancestry.com or 23andMe. But according to the terms of service of either one of those organizations, they have to give me notice that there is a search warrant, and then I have the opportunity to go try to quash that warrant with respect to my data, with respect to my DNA. Now, if that's a local judge, it might be affordable. But do I have the resources to hire an attorney in one state or 5 states or 20 states or 50 states to go fight a blanket search warrant like that? No, I don't. And so, therefore, I have resisted the urge to submit my DNA to one of these databases. Now that you know about it, how willing are you? How willing are you to give up actual parts of your body to be tested and then put into a database so you can find out how many of your ancestors came from Ireland or Estonia or came from Australia or part Cherokee Indian or part Navajo or part Ute or whatever it might be. Oh, but Michael, I have nothing to hide. You think you have nothing to hide until you get caught in a dragnet from a search warrant that says, yeah, you can go search all of these databases. And even if they find a match that erroneously connects you to a crime scene, you then have to go fight that. You then are put in the position of challenging what you have given to somebody and now proving that you're innocent. It upends American jurisprudence. It upends the idea that we're innocent until proven guilty. You get swept up in a search warrant, and whether it's a false positive or it just happens to be a false match of some sort, you get pinged, you get prosecuted, you get dragged into a case, and now you have to figure a way out of it. Still want to submit that DNA? Still think that you have nothing to hide? When it comes to privacy, if you're one of those individuals that says, oh, but I have nothing to hide, all I ask is think about that. Because indeed you may have nothing to hide, but that doesn't mean that you can't get caught up in a false positive or a false link or something else that suddenly bankrupts you trying to prove your innocence. Think about that situation.